Well, here we are, the last week in the course. And this is, of course, my favorite week just because I am a contemporary artist. I love contemporary art. Um, I don't teach medieval or Renaissance in the theory. I teach contemporary art in the department here. And art criticism for the students besides the studios. So this is the best part because, for several reasons, you've learned our language and you can apply it to different degrees. You did design, so you applied those principles. You know a lot of our language. You know how to describe works of art. You've looked at some all the way back to prehistoric, and you can describe these works, whether they're realistic or abstract. It's small in scale, so you have the language. And then I want to do a really quick overview to bring you up to modern and why it is so important. Because you are modern, actually you are postmodern. We'll get to that by the second video. So here you have coming out, well, let's just go into the West. In the medieval period, you had 1,000 years of medieval history. No studying the figure like the Greeks. 1,000 years, no figure. Churches, that's why the Romanesque and the cathedrals got the cathedrals. Everything was made to go into churches. It was all faith-based. 1,000 years. It's also not a scientific period, like they're trying to turn straw into gold, things like that. So finally, the Renaissance, the rebirth of humanism, we go back and we look at the Greeks. They started to dig up even ruins and study the Greeks because there is no figure for 1,000 years. You want to sculpt a figure. So then you have, and that takes place. And then you have from the next 400 or 500 years, Renaissance to the Romantic period. Stylistically, you just have classical Greek, Renaissance, Baroque, Hellenistic Greek, Neoclassical, Classical Greek, Romantic period, Hellenistic Greek. So, stylistically, meaning it was about order and restraint, an idea, or it was about emotional and drama and action with Hellenistic. So in all these periods, up to Turner actually, up to Romanticism, it was all faith-based still. It was still faith-based, the subject, okay? And that's why you have David and the Madonna series, etc. But by the time you get to modernism, this is where we are, we're going to leave that Greco-Roman influence stylistically. And something very, very important, well, many things happened, but technically or technologically, something happened that changed the way artists looked at things and how to make images. And it was the camera. Very simply, the camera. Now, artists were already doing, their role had changed with the Romantic period and Turner, or actually was called in the slave ship. Artists then also saw their role as social commentary. Had not prior to that. By the way, in the medieval period, if I didn't share this with you, artists in the medieval period, we were just blue-collar workers. They built those, they carved those stone sculptures. We did not become intellects or are viewed as an intellect and valued until the Renaissance. So modernism is important, and it's going to lead us into contemporary. And let me just say this. As we go through this, there were links that connected those civilizations. There are no links now that connect these styles. Modernism, Industrial Revolution, a difference in sciences and politics, etc. So art reflects the culture it exists in, a lot of changes. We're looking at late 1800s, and a lot of change since then, especially in the 20th century. So that's where we're going to begin with this PowerPoint with modernism, and we have the camera, 1826. Very simply, why should artists paint a portrait when a camera can take a picture? So, this was like a crisis. Like, what, paint? Some painters thought, well, painting is dead. Well, no. We are creative. We just change up. We adapt. Humankind does that. And so it was really like, whoa, I don't have to do faith-based. I don't have to do religious subject matter. Because who is supporting the arts? Michelangelo, the Baroque period, the church was supporting the arts, or the Medici family, like wealthy families. So, and they want certain images. By the time you get to modernism and you have the camera, artists are like free to say, I can paint what I want. Now, we also looked at how the eastern part of the globe leans towards abstraction. Always sort of leaned towards abstraction. The West leaned towards realism. So if you go back and look at Turner, that image in the snowstorm, I mean, that was, late 1800s. That's abstract in the West. So you already have some abstracted images taking place. So this is not going to be really new when Monet does it. But this is where we begin. And, we're talking about the French because, like right now in contemporary art, the centers of change for the arts are still New York City. But there's also other centers that are very important, like Beijing and in Germany. So there's pockets. But when we start with modernism, and actually a lot of it begins in France, a lot of new ideas and a lot of new styles coming out of France. So this is Courbet. It's 1850. You have the camera around 1826. And, this is what Courbet says right here. Show me an angel and I'll paint one. So artists realize now they can paint whatever they want. And so here you have, it's called the Burial at Arons. It's called realism, obviously. And Gustave Courbet, not my favorite painting, but I appreciate it. It has value because it's just everyday life. We call that genre. And the genre of everyday life. And so here is a funeral. And here is mourners. A dog right here wanders in. Here's the hole. Here's a little fellow looking around. So, they're just painting everyday life during this period. Thank you, camera. Well, then this is going to have huge ramifications during this period and on contemporary art. because, as we say, Pandora's box is now open. And so what you're just going to see is a lot of styles. Boom, boom, boom. And we'll start with the next style after realism. We call that 19th century realism, is Impressionism by Monet. Now, you'll note a lot of times I do not use the first name, Claude Monet. I just say Monet. So here you go. Since they moved away from the camera, Courbet's doing realism, but then Monet and others, the Impressionists, go abstract. Because what is this? Now, he does a series of cathedrals, and the subject is a cathedral, but the purpose of the painting is to study light and color. That is Impressionism. And there's many, many images of him painting this cathedral, different time of day, different weather condition, different time of the year. So that is Impressionism, your impression. These paintings didn't take very long, or they would do studies and go back to their studio, whereas some huge other paintings could take as much as 2 years in the Romantic period. Wrath of Medusa took a long time to paint, and others. But these are very quick studies that become paintings about the impression of a moment. So really, students, it's about light and color. Although the subject is a cathedral, and that is Impressionism, and there are many Impressionists. We'll just talk about some of them, but you would call them post-Impressionists. What does Van Gogh do with the Impressionist color and light? Okay, so now we're really talking also about like design, color. They're studying color. There are many post-impressionists like Cezanne, Renoir, Cassatt, Degas. We're not going to cover them, but there's so much written about Van Gogh. And there's this famous painting titled Starry Night. And his biography precedes him because, he had a pretty difficult life, and then he took a little bit of his ear off for this girl and whatever. But, I just talk about Van Gogh. He's important, really, to me for just one simple reason. He uses light and color. This is impasto technique, by the way, which is thick application of paint, impasto. But he brings emotion to works of art. So it's about emotion with color. That's what I say. Then you have another style. See, we're just doing styles now. We're not looking at, in this course, well, what influenced this? What's going on in the politics? We're saying now this style follows that style. And then that style and so right now, there are, I'm sure, more than 100 styles taking place at the same time in contemporary art. And that's why it is more difficult to understand. The Renaissance, everyone was on the same sheet of music. The Baroque, Neoclassical. Everyone thought about painting in the same way. What was the subject? Religious. It had to be this classical twist. Everyone thought about it in the same way. By the time you get to modernism, to today, we have so many styles kept changing, just because culture, Western culture, has changed so much since the 20th century, the 1900s. So then you have Expressionism. It's a style. And you have Edvard Munch, and this is a very famous painting called The Scream. And Expressionism is what I would say is more like the Hellenistic Greek, which is emotional. It's not Hellenistic Greek, but it is emotion. It's about the inner psyche. Expressionism usually responds to the inner psyche. It expresses that, and it's usually not real pleasant, Expressionism. Um, and so in this case, it's the early 20th century, and people are moving away from farms into the cities to work, and squalor conditions. You don't have any child labor laws. Children are working, and so this artist is addressing that shift, and his work is about a sense of alienation or loneliness or anxiety. Edvard Munch with Expressionism. Now, I have this slide, and you can take time to read it in detail, but this is a true story, and I'm moving us to Cubism with Picasso. But this is, I'm saying, what would a painting look like if you had carpet bombing by the Germans in around 1937 on the village of Guernica, practicing carpet bombing a civilian city and just, devastating and terrorizing and killing all these civilians. So here you can read the details in the PowerPoint. Okay. What should that painting look like? Now, we actually come to someone very important, a style or Cubist style, and it was not just Picasso, it was also another artist that worked with him in developing Cubism. But this is right here on the bottom. This is a Cubist and is in black and white painting. This is part of the painting by Picasso, and it is titled Guernica, and that's the city, and then above it is actually a photograph of that city. So this is a modern approach, and what we see here, students, is, and you have to cross the bridge, by the way, into the 20th century, and then the 21st century. You have to let go of Greco-Roman realism, the ideal. And so this is Cubism, and this is Picasso painting in black and white that story. He is Spanish himself, of that carpet bombing. And so, yeah, it is abstracted. And then you leave behind this idealized realism. And so what is he doing? Well, it's design. It is multiple viewpoints, and I'll show you right here. So here is the eye is looking outwards, and here's a profile right here as well. Here's the bull, so it is very abstracted. So here, a lot of symbolism here. I won't go into that. Here is the loss of a mother and her child. So you can see, you can impact loss. It doesn't have to be descriptive realism. A lot of symbolism here with the light. Now, this is where I told you early on that, nothing is really new. We just appropriate. So these people, these artists, men and women in France at this time, they were actually studying ancient works, and this is directly influenced by the Egyptians. The Egyptians had the eye looking out, and then you had the profile. There's a reason they did that. It's not that they couldn't draw if they wanted to. They built the pyramids, for God's sakes. They came up with a system. They didn't want to use foreshortening. They didn't want the arm coming towards you. The arms are sideways because that shows movement the most directly. In the face, if you're going to paint a face, the nose is foreshortened. Or if you have a camera, you have depth of field. Some is in focus, others out of focus. Egyptians said, well, we'll just do the profile because that is the easiest way to identify someone without foreshortening, as well as the eye looking out. So, this is real simple. But you have to let go of realism. So this is actually an important painting. It's, 1905, And here I'm explaining that and showing you a really nice cool picture of Egyptian. And I want to show you also, because Cubism is very important, first of all, you have collage for the first time as a work of art. Pasting up, mixing different images. That was like so unlike anything in art history. But what I also want to show you here is that not only were the Cubists multiple viewpoints, which means also, okay, I'm going to show you, the painting's going to show you the side of the cup, the top of the cup, and the bottom of the cup, all at the same time, multiple viewpoints. They were influenced by ancient African. Because the ancient Africans, when we get to multicultural part, those ancient civilizations, they didn't do realism. It was all abstracted and use of materials to express an idea, a feeling, or an emotion. And so here is a beautiful African mask, abstracted. It's about shape. Here's this shape. If I talked about it, I would say, well, this is an emphasis of shape and line because this is an edge where this plane turns. And you look at the proportion, very small, and then this elongated large shape. Here is one large shape, and here's two smaller shapes, and then the eyes turn sideways, elongated, even smaller. So this is all about design. Ancient civilizations were about design, patterns, etc. So it's important to understand that Picasso is seeing this work coming in. They're actually not museums, they're in curio shops. And they're just shocked at the power of abstraction, the power of the African sculptures. They were actually, purposeful in that they were ritualistic. So the Europeans they're taking them out of context, and then the European work, the Cubism, is about something else. And it's about challenging the history of art and what an image can look like, how an image can convey meaning. That's what it's about. So that's very important. Now, like I said, we're only in 1913, but by the time we get 1915, we have like about 10 new styles. 15. I'm not even covering them all. Because we have world wars, that is going to change everything. World War I. The two world wars, World War I and World War II, are going to have a huge impact on artists, because if art reflects the culture, then what are they going to talk about? A lot of devastation. Okay, again, I digress. So what I'm doing here is I'm just showing you need to know the big powerhouse styles, not the minor styles that the art student would know. Cubism, Expressionism, Dada. 1913 by Marcel Duchamp. This is very important, because this is a sculpture, and it is a bicycle wheel mounted in a four-legged stool, and the bicycle wheel turns, so it's kinetic. So you say, well, okay, well, I could have made that. Well, it's already been made. So what is this? It is conceptual. And now you have to understand a very simple premise. Art expresses an idea or an emotion. This is not about an emotion. And this is where art museums, artists have left the public who are looking for emotion or realism, or the ideal most often. This is about an idea, and the idea is to challenge what art should be. What should it be made of? Does it have to be carved stone? Does it have to be casted metal? Duchamp says it can be made out of anything. Keep in mind, this is the Industrial Revolution. There is already mass production taking place. A lot of stuff. Mass production. So not just like a homemade item. Now it's mass produced. And so this is going to have an influence because Duchamp says, like we know, materials, form, and meaning is what is a work of art. Material influences meaning. Material is important. It can be any material. So you have a bicycle wheel and a stool. Now, if you're like, balking here, you need to just like when you did that design, you need to let go and come into the 20th century. Because this is about an idea. And the idea is challenging the hundreds of years of history about what art is made out of. And so what occurs is you create a hierarchy like, oh, well, stone is more important than bronze, or bronze and stone is more important than a quilt. Well, it's not more important than a quilt if you're a woman and you're not allowed to study art, and the only thing you can do is you are allowed to sew, and that's how you express yourself. So this takes apart this idea of a hierarchical material. Doesn't mean we can't have bronze poured or stone carved, but we have other things. So that is what Dadaism is. It is to challenge what art should be made out of. These are called ready-mades because they already exist. He doesn't have to build this bicycle wheel. He doesn't have to build this stool. So it is a philosophical movement. He does another thing, Marcel Duchamp. He challenges who decides what art is. Now, that's the philosophical question that you need to be aware of, especially in contemporary period. Historically, it was, well, who's the patron? Who's supporting the artist to make these artifacts? Well, is it then the Medici family? Is it the church? Is it the National Endowments for the Arts in this country? Is it a grant? So someone has to be supporting the arts, as well as the artist himself is supporting his art by maybe not having a patron. So he poses this question: who decides what art is? Has been in the past decided upon by those, having ordering the commission. So his answer is the artist. Artists decide. We decide what art is, and it continues to change. Do I think children's art is artful and good? Absolutely. It's wonderful. Does it belong in a museum? Does it reflect the culture it exists in? No, it doesn't. It actually reflects their intellectual development, their age, and they're expressing their idea. It is beautiful. All right, so that's Dadaism. So if you can accept that, then you can understand why you see a lot of odd things today, because art can be made out of anything. So this just talks about when you have these world wars, 10 million dead, some 20 million wounded, we are going to, as artists, challenge why we make what we make. Who decides what it should be and what it should look like? So that's Duchamp, and he just has a copy of the Mona Lisa, and he paints a little mustache on it. That's pretty famous too. Now we go to another one, another style in the 30s. You're going to like this because it's surrealism. These are a lot of styles. So what you need to know is the style, the artist, the title of these pieces, and what is the style about. That's what your worksheet's going to be. What is this sort of, well, let me restate that. Was there an influence? Sometimes there's more of an influence than another time, okay? Is there a significant influence? And what is the style about? And so now you have psychoanalysis, because you have Sigmund Freud and surrealism. Realism is going to look real, but surrealism, because you have psychoanalysis of Sigmund Freud and dream imagery, because remember he looked at dreams and our subconscious, all those things. Well, in dreams you can fly, you can do all sorts of things. So artists like this wonderful painter Salvador Dali brings this surrealist dream imagery. This is titled Persistence of Memory, and it is still, so I think, a very popular style of surrealism. It's actually in contemporary art is called lowbrow style, mostly out in California. So I just wanted to share his beautiful painting. And this is him. This is also surrealist style. Yep. All right. Now you got to do another leap. Like, what is this? If the bicycle wheel wasn't difficult enough, now you got to look at a work that has no subject by Jackson Pollock. Jackson Pollock there's no subject. Now we're already in the 50s. He was still, he was working like many others, in the 30s and the 40s. All these artists, by the way, could draw anything. Their drawings were exquisite. So you just don't start by saying, oh, I'm an abstract painter. It doesn't work that way. You go to school, you work from life, you learn how to do realism, and then you develop a voice about what you want your work to be about, or you're very connected to culture, and you move in a direction. Well, Turner was already doing abstraction. So if there's no subject, he is literally has the canvas on the floor. He's not on an easel upright, and he is throwing the paint from a can, or he has a long stick, and he's painting with this paintbrush and a stick and moving these are very large paintings, this paint around. So, well, what is this then? Well, you already know it's non-objective. There is no reference to nature. It's abstract, but it's also, or you could say it's non-objective. Students, this is about the act of painting, the immediacy. And if you can let go of the subject and the ideal, this is about the immediacy of the mark making. The mark is what we call that painted mark. It's the process, literally the process of painting, because he's in the moment of painting. And this was directly influenced by a very important philosophy called existentialism. Coming out of 2 world wars, existentialism is all we can control is this moment, right now. Right, we're in this moment. So this painting is about the act of painting in that moment. And you're also influenced by, because he's coming out of surrealism and that idea of, our subconscious. That's part of this too. With Sigmund Freud is, just like you did with your designs, you're in that moment where your intuition, you could call it subconscious, you call it intuition, is working, and then you have to stop and say, okay, well, is in your design, do I need a larger shape here? Is this balanced? And that's exactly what he's doing here. just like those shapes you moved around. He stops painting, says, no, I need some more yellow here. And then if we talk about this, what are we going to talk about? Well, what is the painting about? It is you do feel an immediacy. That's the aesthetic. And you'd say, well, it has rhythm and movement, and he's using color, black and white, and he's using warm colors. There's line and shapes. There's variety. That's how you describe this. So there's him painting, at work painting. So here is one of his paintings. This is one you should know. The title is easy, number 1. And so what are they doing? You know, what is this painting? Well, it's about scale, line, movement, rhythm. It's not objective, so that's all the language you already know. Now let me just say this. You are understanding everything I'm saying conceptually. This is a little teeny picture of this painting. And you're understanding everything conceptually. You do not experience a work of art. Just like you hear me talking, here's a little picture. I'm going on and on. You don't experience me until you are in front of me in my office or where I see you in a gallery. Okay? So you can't experience this painting. So you don't have the experience, the experiential of me until you are with me in my presence. Even with the Zoom meeting, it's still not in my presence. And you not in my presence. So when you go to, you're understanding this conceptually, but you're not going to really know if you like it, if you have an aesthetic response, until you're at the museum standing in front of these huge works. And that's all you see. The closer you get, all you see is a space of moving lines and depth. So just know that. So that's abstract expressionism. Now we already said expressionism with Edvard Munch evokes, you know, an emotion, a feeling, and it's usually, you know, for expressionism, not always pleasant. But expressionism is about a feeling. So this is also about feelings and mark making, abstract expressionism. This is figurative abstract expressionist Willem de Kooning. And I showed you, and these are huge paintings, by the way. These are not little paintings. This is like practically life size, this painting. And I just showed you here drawing by de Kooning. A still life, you could draw. But this is the mark making, abstract expressionism. This is really actually important. Some stage figurative, like Willem de Kooning. Some went totally non-objective. Jackson Pollock, he left the figure. De Kooning stayed with the figure. So, you know, as you look back at this, and I won't go into analyzing the color palette, the volume, the flatness, well, I mean, everything he does here create this visual image, but, you know, we've looked at women very briefly and limited, but, you know, women have been idealized throughout history, actually literally objectified, totally objectified. Men are heroic, women are objectified. And this woman will get you. She's a powerful woman. She will get you. So he did a woman series. He's very famous for that, as well as other types of mark making. Willem de Kooning. Now you get to pop art. Now we're in the 60s. Everyone knows pop art. Andy Warhol. Soup cans. Well, what is this pop art? With Duchamp, and Dadaism. Then, by the way, Dada, it means nothing. It was inane. It was intentionally inane. That word doesn't mean anything. Impressionism, the impression during time of day. Pop art, what is popular in culture is what you see. So if you go back to Duchamp, 1913, the bicycle wheel, you have Industrial Revolution, you have a lot of stuff being mass produced. By the time you get to the 60s, not only do you have a lot of stuff, we have a lot of stuff, you have a lot of images because of technology, mass production, printed image. You call it mass media, social media. Boom, boom, boom. Images, images, images. So this is the beginning of that glut, that overproduction of posters, commercial images. And so pop art is more, Andy Warhol actually is brilliant because he says, you know what, if art reflects the culture, what we exist in, the public isn't going to know Bernini like you. They're not going to know Bernini's David, the Baroque period. But they know Campbell's soup cans. By the way, this is the 60s, so you weren't even born, and trust me, there weren't all these different kinds of soups. There was just pretty much Campbell. And you look down the aisle, and it's just an aisle of Campbell soup. So this is about iconic images, everyday objects. What he does is, with pop art, he's saying he's turning a mirror and saying, this is who we are. So, Campbell soup cans. This is actually screen printed on canvas, and it's large, and so you have repetition. It is mundane, yes. It's, again, it reflects the culture we exist in, what is popular. And so you have iconic celebrities, and he would have those like Martin Luther King or Marilyn Monroe or someone that most people knew because they were very popular, just like today. So everything that you're seeing on TV is spinning off of what's happening at this period and building towards your period. So this is pop art. And so pop art sculptures, there you go. This is Oldenburg. You've seen this. And so the sculptures would just be everyday objects like a book of matches. I know people don't use matches like they used to. But these are installed permanent installations, and they're fun. Art doesn't have to be sad or idealized or realism. It can just be fun. Art can be anything. Thank you, Marcel Duchamp. Who decides what art is? So these are very famous. They're all over Philadelphia when you see these pieces. This happens to be in Barcelona. And you notice it is a primary color palette. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. So these are pop art sculptures. Here's another one of his in Philadelphia, this fabricated steel clothespin. You have dryers. Some of you may not even know what a clothespin is. So that's Oldenburg, and that is pop art sculpture. And then we now have photorealism. Now, all the styles we've talked about, they influence new styles, and people are still painting in those styles. So again, where you had one style in the Renaissance, right now there's like, 100, maybe not 100, 50, 60 styles happening at one time, and then add technology, and it's crazy interesting. So what happened was with the abstract expressionists, I mean, people didn't really do realism anymore. They couldn't even get a show because it was like, nah, that's old school. So then people go back to it. Many still do abstract. Some said no, because of technology, the camera, printing processes, the computer, now you have a style called photorealism. And so this is Chuck Close, but these are actually painted. He projects his image, he does a little outline, he has his photograph, and he's gridded his photograph out with an airbrush, and that's new technology. Now you have airbrush that was developed, and you have acrylic paint. You just don't have oil. So by the time you have airbrush, technology, acrylic paint that dries quickly, he is spraying square inch by square inch to create this image. And so you say, well, okay, it looks real, but what is photorealism in the 60s, 70s about? It is about the everyday, just like pop art. And so, but it is supposed to be mundane, not emotional, just some guy. No expression, that's its purpose. But you're going to love photo. I mean, they were amazing paintings. This just happens to be Chuck Close, who does these portraits. There were many artists that did cityscapes and landscapes, just reflections in windows, and they were phenomenal. They're all paintings. And so this is photorealism, and this is sculpture. Now, this takes place because you have plastics and you have polymers. And so it is not in bronze, it is not carved in stone. So he has all these different people doing all different things. Here is a painter. These are life size. When I saw this photorealist sculpture show in Virginia, it was, I had just come out of undergraduate, sort of stumbled into this, and it was like, whoa. There's a guard, you go over and ask them a question, they look so realistic. So here's two folks. These are, again, this is in the 70s. They're vacationing. Here's his camera bag, here's his white socks. Here's the couple, the tourist down in Florida. And so Chuck Close is just doing everyday people, doing what they do, working, out and about. That's photorealist sculptures. And this came along also. Now, you already had wax museums of people, but now that you have polymers and plastics, you can do a lot more with materials and for mold making and things. And the wax museums have changed drastically because of the polymers, which is, water-based. What is this? This is minimalism. Now, minimalism is very simply a response to pop art, to photorealism. It is abstract, obviously, and it is saying it is repetition with Donald Judd's work. And so the minimalists say, look, I want to reduce art to its simplest, just the minimal, like if you're a minimalist, you don't need a lot of stuff. Not only that, but I want to take the signature from the work. And so the minimalist form would be a geometric form. And the signature means that when you sign something, it is your signature. When painters paint, you have a mark-making signature. Pollock, de Kooning, that mark that each artist makes is unique, just like your signature. And so I'm going to take the signature away, so I'm going to actually have a welder weld these pieces. So they're very mechanical looking. They are not to evoke emotion. Minimalism. And it's abstract. It is not objective abstraction. And what it is about no emotion, repetition, and it's beautiful. Repeat, 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 and these geometric forms. So minimalism is an important movement style that happened, still with us. And if you don't like that, I'm going to show you how how this influenced something you will like, because with minimalism, there is no emotion. It is stacked, these stacked forms, beautiful color, right? Oh, I thought it was the next slide. I guess not. I guess I'll get to it. Sorry. This is Earth. Oh, no, no, no. I'm sorry. Yeah, it was coming up. So this is the Earthworks. Earthworks is in the 70s. So we leave minimalism. Minimalism still goes on even today. And then these are installations. And you know what that means. That means that they are installed temporarily. They cost millions of dollars. And those artists are usually generating that. They're funded by patrons, etc. Or they sell t-shirts, whatever. And so this is using the earth. And this is Smithson's Spiral Jetty. It is an installation. If you're going to use the earth, it has to be extremely large in scale. Artists are saying, look, I'm taking work out of the gallery, taking it out of the museum. It's going to be part of the planet. And so this Spiral Jetty, it was built out in the Great Salt Lake in Utah. You could actually walk out on it and on top of it. And so part of it's still there. You know, you do have erosion, whatever. But it's so huge. It's 1,500 linear feet. You know, you could see that while you're in a plane. And it looks like just like a monkey tail or something. And so earthwork is important because it's saying that it's about being, it's about organic, a response to minimal, which is, you know, very cold and geometric. And it is responding to nature, looking at nature and responding to it. And that is the time when we had our first Earth Day in the 70s. Well, excuse me, we didn't have Earth Day until 20 years later. This is artists 20 years earlier responding. So as you look at this, you say, wow, okay. But it's not new. Because Stonehenge is a huge sculpture in England where you have these monolithic stones, and it's still there, these megaliths, and that's like earthwork. They're using the earth as part of these stones, as part of their expression. So using the earth is really not new. Those are earthworks, and they are temporary and large in scale. I guess we're going to get to what I referenced, but let me just continue. We're going to leave earthworks, and we're going to go to conceptual art. I love conceptual art. Conceptual, an idea. This is the 70s. I know I have at least 1 or 2 psychology majors, and this is going to make total sense to y'all. We would not have this style if we didn't have Dadaism, because this is about an idea. We already have psychology and psychoanalysis, and now by the time you get to the 60s and 70s, you've already had 2 important, the most important movements in the last century, which is civil rights and the women's movement. And so if I could talk about that philosophically, there's one word, and it's about perception. Perceptions. This is what this work is about. The idea of perceptions, how we see things, is relevant today. So this remains relevant. Everything that we're looked at remains relevant to contemporary art. Perception. So when you look at this, it is conceptual art. It is about an idea. It's not about an emotion. But it's how our perceptions, how we perceive meaning in words and imagery. By now you have something called semiotics, which is also a science now. And so here is a definition of a chair on the wall. That's on your right. And use my cursor. I'm pointing my pen. That is a definition of a chair. Here is a photograph of a chair, and here is a chair. 1 and 3 chairs is the title. I love Kossuth because what is chairness? So is it a definition in a dictionary? Is it a photograph you see? This is already distorted. It's not three-dimensional. This is language. And here it is three-dimensional and you can sit in it. So conceptual art in the 70s is about an idea of how we perceive meaning. And this is going to be very influential in on a lot of different styles. Continues to be influential today. And we would not have this if we did not have Duchamp with Dadaism saying, you know, art can be made out of anything. Are you still with me? All right. And I had to wade through all that Paleolithic stuff to get to here, but you just have to know, you have to know the big picture. All right, let's continue. Here you go. I don't know why I put this slide here. This is a mix of minimalism and earthwork styles. And I may be coming to the end of my slides. I'm not sure. I didn't preview this. So if I hit next and I end, I didn't know what was at the end. So this is one of the most famous war memorials that people go to, the Vietnam War Memorial in DC. And it is an earthwork because when you go in, it is dug out. And that is the wall that people go see. But this is also minimalist. It's just this right here wall of marble with thousands and thousands of the names of men and women who lost their lives in Vietnam. And so there is a close-up of people going to that monument in Washington, D.C. And so this is, the reason this works is because it is an earthwork, but it's a permanent, not a temporary one, where it's dug into the ground. But this cold black marble flat shape is minimal. But the juxtaposition of the minimal cold black marble with all those names and you're reading it just creates this new meaning or an emotion. So it is a very successful piece. And this is what Washington wanted. They didn't want this wall. They wanted the idealized, here's the 3 figures, you know, 3 guys, 3 different races. This exists, but they had enough sense to create 2, to have 2. And so this figurative one is also near the wall that you can go visit. I think that's the end.